Hi, I'm Scott Starratt with Starratt Wealth Management. December saw a little bit of a stable month as we recovered a bit from the downturn, or a little bit of a downturn anyway, in global stock markets in November. November's drop was primarily due to a little bit of weakness in the AI technology trade in the US. December saw that recover a bit, and we also saw things broaden out. For the year, we've finished our third year for major stock markets being higher, a relatively rare occurrence. As you know, as we've said for many videos, we are positioned relatively cautiously. We do feel that we want to have money exposed to the market. However, we want to keep money on the sidelines, whether that's through cash or some of the other more conservative investments, to take advantage of opportunities if they do arise. We don't want to just be sitting on our hands, waiting and being at the whim of markets. We actually want to be a little proactive and deal with it if the opportunity does arise. But the biggest thing I want to talk about this month was the Venezuelan, I guess you'd say, capture of their president, or lack of a better word, military or large military operation by the U.S. government. And on the surface, this does seem relatively benign. Venezuela, small country, even though it has oil assets, we can believe or not believe what the U.S. government is saying or the reasons behind this takeover, or not takeover, but this capture. But here's the reality as we see it. We've been spending a lot of time reading everything from Bloomberg to Alpha Insights to the Globe and Mail, and it's quite interesting how serious this has become for the global repositioning. And what I mean by that is, when you look at something like this, where the US has essentially said, we are going to control a bunch of oil, we are going to control this hemisphere. And so that would be North America into the Americas. And by proxy, some people have said that that means that they are allowing other areas of the world to fend for themselves. Now, we've seen, the U.S. administration really focused on Europe, and kind of trying to get the Europeans to take more of an interest in their own area, as opposed to the U.S. being backers in a direct way. We've seen a little bit less interest in Asia from the Americans, primarily that they're focusing again on America first, and they see America first as countries like Colombia, Venezuela, etc. And so there's two things that I want to bring up. First, on the oil side. So I had the opportunity to sit down with one of our managers on the oil side yesterday. And at this point, there's a feeling that this is, for the most part, headline risk. A lot of headlines have come out about how much energy or how much oil the U.S. is going to take from Venezuela and what the impact is going to be on Canada, and in particular, the Canadian oil sands. It's really too early to tell, although his view is it's not really a concern right now. The amount of money and effort that's going to have to be spent over the coming decade in order to bring up production to a reasonable standard that it is competitive to Canada is immense. At this point, there does not seem to be the will or desire of U.S. oil companies to invest a whole bunch of money unless there's more guarantees on stability. And to be quite frank, because Venezuela had the military operation here so recently, there's still a big unknown as to how that country is going to react going forward. I think the other side we have to look at is how much or what the impact is this mean geopolitically. So some questions to ask that we always ask is, does this imply that China now has more of a free rein when it comes to how they deal with Taiwan? How is Cuba going to deal with one of their major benefactors, which being Venezuela, being now out of commission, at least for a while? What does the Cuban government do? Because for the most part, they were getting most of their energy needs from Venezuela. In exchange, they actually provided Venezuela a lot of security, and that was only represented here with some of the numbers coming out this morning that indicated that about 32, unfortunately, people were killed in this U.S. raid, most of them Cubans, as the Cubans provided a lot of military support for the Venezuelan government. Greenland is another area, and everybody laughs off Greenland and says, "Yeah, well, the Americans aren't serious," and in some ways they probably aren't. Although probably is still a pretty vague term. Probably aren't as it applies to what's going on with them putting boots on the ground, so to speak, and going in militarily. But they do see Greenland as a key asset for everything from Arctic trade routes to military for Russia or against Russia and China. So Greenland is a big deal to the U.S. government, and so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the coming months or years even. So what does that mean for investments? I think it does add a greater degree of uncertainty. It does have a situation occur, or could have a situation occur where something gets broken unintentionally. Whenever you have this much change going on in the world, and like I said, I do believe this is a fundamental change. When you have this amount of change going on in the world, things can get unintentionally impacted. So we are continuing to be cautious. Like I said, I think that it's too early to tell what's going to happen with all these geopolitical moves, and what impact it's going to be, and whether it's going to be positive for Canada or positive for the markets. But caution still continues to be our thought. As well, on the energy side, we see this more as an opportunity than a negative. A lot of the energy managers that we would use would have more exposure to natural gas than oil anyway. That being said, is this an opportunity for the Canadian oil sector to do quite well? Time will tell. But for right now, we're continuing to watch things as they play out geopolitically and what impact that's going to have on the investments. As we get into the beginning of the year, now that we're going to be talking to most of you about what's happened over the last few years, as well as some of the normal tax-free savings accounts, RESP, RSP, all those contributions that typically get made at the beginning of the year. So we'll be reaching out in the coming weeks to discuss that. But as always, if you do have any questions, please do reach out to the team. Or if, as you're going through talking to family or friends, if they do want a second opinion on their investments, please do reach out to us, as we're more than happy to get together for a coffee to discuss that with them.